Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell, where we talk about real life, challenge assumptions, and explore different ways of being in the world. This week, for episode 38, I have Raven Bennett, a licensed professional counselor, joining me to discuss what it was like to be diagnosed with ADHD later in life and how this diagnosis is becoming more common in women and girls, and how being neurodivergent is actually neuronormative or neurotypical. I hope you enjoy. So welcome to the Energetic Psyche, hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell. This week for episode 38, I have Raven Perry, a licensed professional counselor, joining me to discuss what it was like to be diagnosed with ADHD later in life, how this diagnosis is becoming more common in women and girls, and how being neurodivergent is actually neuronormative. So here's a little bit about Raven before we jump in. Raven is a visionary and mental health therapy practice owner who thrives when making the best better. She lives by her values of authenticity, balance, sustainability, and accountability, and strives to be kind in all things. When she's not seeing her own clients, solving insurance billing problems, or building a new phase of practice development, she can be found enjoying her partner's company while raising wild boys and attempting to keep up with general upkeep in their beloved, massive, historic home in rural Missouri. So, Raven, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am sincerely looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it too. Kind of snuck up on me because we talked about it a few months ago, but yeah, October rolled around fast.
Didn't it? I swear, don't get me wrong. I am not a heat person, so I'm not sad to see summer go, but it did go very quickly. It was just, gone. So, yeah. So why don't we start with just telling us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I guess predominantly, I'm a trauma therapist. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I've been working in the field for 10 years now, which was crazy to do the math on recently as I put that together. It's like, wow, I'm a 10-year vet now.
Nice.
And I've working in complex trauma early on in my career, I really started catching that there were many people that I was working with where we were missing something. We were missing pieces. And that led to starting to develop an understanding of neurodivergence. So autism, ADHD, even PTSD can create some neurodivergent traits. That was slightly different from, the textbook definitions, starting to see, okay, there are traits and things that come through that aren't as we describe them. And as I put these pieces together for the first couple of clients that we explored, particularly in autism diagnosis, also ADHD, it answered so much for their lives. It filled in gaps where they'd always felt othered, always felt like they were missing something that everybody else just implicitly understood. It allowed us to access different avenues of treatment, different skills, or to use skills in different ways than someone who was not autistic would. And more than anything, it created this deep validation normalization for them.
Right.
Along the way, I was diagnosed with ADHD pretty early in my career, and I fought that one hard because I had great grades and could focus on stuff. Didn't really connect that focusing for 17 hours on a spreadsheet might be more hyperfixation than focus, but didn't make sense to me. Got medical treatment for that, started a stimulant for the first time, which was life-changing and really radically adjusted my symptoms of what I had always called depression, but was really just kind of a depressive burnout as a response to not being able to focus, not being able to maintain function in my world. And then later, just actually within close to a year ago, stumbled into self-diagnosis with autism. And that was a bubble I had never even considered putting myself in because like many of us neurodivergent females out here, I have social skills. I make great eye contact.
Right.
I'm pretty social. I'm definitely an introvert, but don't have any problem holding my own in a group if I need to, which all felt like disqualifiers. And the biggest thing that I would say is, but I don't feel autistic.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what does that even mean?
Well,
yeah.
That we were talking about, my brother was diagnosed with Asperger's when he was, very young, 2 years old, maybe, had some really loud symptoms, we'll say. And then over time, with proper help, was able to manage that and get better with social stuff and all of that. But when he was officially diagnosed, like I looked up like what it was and what it meant and realized I had a lot of those symptoms too. And so does my dad. And I talked to my stepmother at the time and was like, hey, like, you know, I think I might have Asperger's as well. Like I looked at a lot of symptoms and she immediately was like, no, you're too social, Adrian. There's no way that you have it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. But as time has gone by, and, you know, as much as I hate like people getting medical advice from Instagram and TikTok,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen stuff that's been like, see, I thought so. But just for everyone watching or listening, I then go actually do research. I don't just take the TikTok and Instagram videos as gospel. I actually go look this stuff up. But yeah, you know, and I kind of realized that I'm definitely on the spectrum too. And I think that's part of it, right? Is it's a spectrum. It's not on or off, yes or no. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And just about anybody may fall on that spectrum somewhere. But the difference between you and I and someone who definitively is not autistic, definitively is not neurodivergent, is the amount of impact it has on our daily lives. How much do these things show up? So there's a book that I recommend just about anyone who's kind of neurodivergent questioning, pick up and read through. It's a short little 100-page paperback called I Think I Might Be Autistic by Cynthia Kim. And the first chunk of that has a ton of questions, just kind of geared towards describing what autism looks like in day-to-day life. And if you resonate with a significant portion of those, she suggests lots of different tools. She goes through differences between self-diagnosis, what we call peer diagnosis, which is where you identify with other autistic people and we all go, yeah, girl, you're here with us, you belong. Or professional diagnosis, which, you know, for some people is a valid and needed route to pursue services or even just for self-validation. Yeah, okay, I have the paperwork. I can actually own this. But Cynthia Kim does a great job of laying things out in a really like practical way of how they show up in life. So for example, I have probably exactly one non-neurodivergent friend, and even she is very ADHD. She's just not on the autistic spectrum. So I had her go through this book because I was like, well, there's, you know, so many people that I talk to resonate with like all of the symptoms and all of the sections. And she's reading and she goes, well, like once in junior high, I had this experience where this one item out of like 40 applied to me for maybe a month. And I'm like, you're absolutely kidding, aren't you? Like, it has to be more than that. And so, you know, have proof that there are people out here who don't experience these things to the extent that you and I do. So just, I think for me personally, it's been such a lens of self-understanding to really normalize where I feel exhaustion, where I need to feed myself, you know, mentally, emotionally, spiritually in different ways, and giving myself permission to have effective limits.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I definitely am going to go grab that book because I kind of just, I mean, years and years ago, I've always been different. I mean, always. And I've kind of just accepted it without understanding why or even exactly how I was different. I just knew that I was. And I've, you know, kind of like you mentioned, you're an introvert, but you can hold your own in conversations. You know, on the Myers-Briggs, I'm like right over the edge into extrovert territory, but have a ton of introvert energy about me. And that's the one thing that, you know, people are always like, yeah, but you get along with others so well and you can read a room and this, that, the other. But
you have an empathy.
Well, and I spent years crafting those skills. Like that was a survival mechanism. That wasn't like, I really don't think that was innate because anyone that's known me for a very long time in my life would know that 20 years ago, I did not get along as easily with people. And it took a lot of work for me. I remember one job I had, I actually got in trouble and got sent to a class on how to get along with others better because I was so job focused. So I would go up to like a coworker's desk and say, hey, so how are you doing with the proposal let's do on Friday? And they would look at me like, what are you doing? Like, hi, Adrian. And I'd be like, hi. And I didn't realize like that was bad, right? And so then I would go up after my class and I would be like,
Mhm.
hello, how are you today? Did you have a nice weekend? How
Yeah.
is the family? Can I ask you about the proposal now? Right? And like over time, like I've learned more
And
and
it's
more.
exhausting to
It
have
is
to
so
expend all of that energy
exhausting.
when you just need to know if the proposal's done or not,
Right, that's all I care about.
right?
I mean, of course,
Yeah,
I care about you and that you're happy and a good person and all that kind of stuff. But that's
right.
not why I came to your desk.
Yeah,
Like I'll catch you at the
yeah.
coffee maker later and we can talk about that kind of stuff.
I
Yeah,
love it. I love
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. It's
So I'm
crazy.
I'm in the process of expanding my private practice right now. I'm building into a group practice, and I've really collected neurodivergent therapists with lots of workplace trauma, often in
Oh,
response to their
completely. Yeah.
neurodivergent traits. And it's just a glorious place to work because of this. But I do a really thorough job of building relationship and making sure that people know how much I do genuinely care so that it carries me through the business conversations. Because when you get messages like portal messages from me about things, I am to the point. Hey, this note isn't signed. This, what's the appointment status here? Da, 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 da. And I just like, I have to have that relationship with my team. And what
Yeah.
I tell them is, I don't have the energy to field all of those social interactions all day, every day when there's 500 of these things I have to get through. So
Mhm.
please always hear this from a non-judgmental place. And we do so much work in like our staff meetings and our team
Nice.
development to really build up that sense of empathy and connectedness so that we can handle being just very direct and honest with each other the rest of the time. And it's glorious because like we're
Oh,
all a bunch of
simple,
neurodivergent
easy.
people just being honest with one another most of the time. And
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
I
it.
often say, like, the people who stay my friends forever are the ones that know I love them,
Right.
don't need constant reassurance. I might not talk to them for 6 months, but when I do, it's like we never stop talking. Like those are the easiest friendships that I can maintain because
Oh,
they know, like they
yeah,
understand that like there's the
yeah,
understanding. Like I
yeah,
love you, I care about you. I'm just
right.
not gonna say that or ask about it all of the time. Yeah.
Well, and let's think about intimate relationship skills. God bless my poor husband, who is an amazing human being, but once in a while has to remind me that he actually needs to hear that he's being a good partner and that I
Mm,
still love him and that I'm not going anywhere. When we've
yeah.
had a season of stress or whatnot, and I'm like, "Well, duh, dumbass, I'm still sitting here, aren't I?" But no, he actually needs me to, like, communicate that we're secure, that
Right,
he's meeting
right.
my needs, that we're okay, even when I'm stressed out and overwhelmed and have been working too much and those kind of things. And it just we've come to find more humor in it as we've gotten healthier. But, early on, that caused us a lot of pain and stress of him
Oh,
just
yeah.
not knowing where he stood with me. And I had
Mhm.
this just perception of security and safety, like, "Yeah, we're good. Like, yeah, we have our troubles like every couple does, but we're fine. Like, I'm not going anywhere. If I was
Right.
going to, I would." And that's, just that very matter of fact way of authentically showing up in the world as I am seemed, to me, it didn't make sense that anyone wouldn't live that way. If I wasn't
Mhm.
secure here, if I didn't want to be here, I would be communicating that to you, or I would already be out the door. But
Yep.
guess what? People don't live that way. Like
And I
people.
think that was probably one of the things that cued me in to
Mhm.
it too, is that like how many times I got in trouble
Yeah.
and sincerely had no idea
Mhm.
what the problem was and like would need it to be explained over and over. Like, Adrian, you hurt my feelings. And I'm like, but like, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, can you help me understand? Because I don't want to do that, but I have no idea how I made that happen.
Right. Right.
Right.
And it's just you can't wrap your head around it.
Yeah, yeah. And thank God at almost 45 years old, I have figured out the majority of these things now. But
That's
trial
fantastic.
and error, I'm sure there have been relationships that have had significant difficulties along the way. And so this is great that this kind of stuff is being talked about more.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's this that there is a spectrum. It's not an on off, you're either here or there. Um, and like you said, it's just the understanding and the validation so that
Mhm.
people, one of the biggest things I talk with clients about, and I'm sure you're similar, is that it, understanding what your needs are so that you can communicate them,
Yeah.
understanding what it is that makes you different or that different ways that you process information so that you can talk about it and share it because that
Yeah.
is going to help build those relationships for you and make them easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So one of the reasons I love this topic so much is breaking down stigma. There's so much stigma around even, especially the word autism, right?
Right.
When we think of autism, honestly, what I believe is that most people actually think of developmental disability, not autism, which are two very separate things with different causes and both can present in a wide variety of ways. But stereotypically, when we think of an autistic individual, we're thinking of a developmentally disabled person with limited verbal capabilities. And that's the picture that people have in their mind. And oftentimes they picture males, they picture people who are very outwardly expressive, who have a lot of meltdowns that are,
Rain Man.
Sorry.
Rain Man.
Yeah.
Right. The movie with Tom Cruise. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And Dustin Hoffman.
Brilliance, angles, like savant categories. And when we look at women, particularly adult women who've been undetected until adulthood, who have masked their way to appearing normal, find ourselves in these states of profound burnout, exhaustion, lack of motivation. We get diagnosed with depression. We get diagnosed with anxiety. We're not responding to traditional medications and traditional therapies. And we're left in this sense that we're just broken, right? Because I can't be autistic. I can't be ADHD. That you're not describing me when we think of the developmentally disabled Rain Man, not describing myself, right? The reality is that stigma is grossly misplaced through a lot of scholarly research that just was not focused on female populations and was not focused on how these are not necessarily illnesses, right? So anything that falls into the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is where all mental health diagnoses live, is automatically considered illness or brokenness. But there's another book that I really love for anybody exploring this topic is called Divergent Mind. It's by, I don't know how to pronounce her name. One of my gifts is blindly stumbling into pronunciations and having no idea if they're correct. And I'll act like I said it. So I'm going to say her name is Janara Narenberg.
Okay.
Narenberg. But Divergent Mind, Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You. Janara does a beautiful job in this book describing how our world evolved so quickly with the Industrial Revolution, other changes that have occurred, tech revolution, that we outgrew people who have very distinct abilities that are absolutely a vital part of human history. The ability to focus deeply, the ability to create calm and stillness, the ability to regulate cycles and keep things ordered, keep things flexible but consistent. These are the people that drove culture forward in other periods of time because of their ability to be focused and skillful and intentional. But in today's world, we need everything right now. Super fast. Productivity is the goal. And if you're not able to keep up, there must be something wrong with you. So that's where we step into pathologizing. Autistic traits, ADHD traits, neurodivergent traits are not inherently problems. They just aren't built for today's world.
Right.
So when we can start to slow down and learn to listen to our bodies and listen to what our nervous systems need, and if you have the profound privilege to be able to start to base your life around some of these things, your overall well-being can radically change. So many people who are neurodivergent develop chronic health conditions, autoimmune disorders. There's a lot of concurrent illness with digestive issues, with other genetic disorders, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, IBS, tons of digestive health stuff. All of those tend to get a little better when we start listening to our bodies instead of trying to make our bodies do what's in the world.
Yeah. And so in all of those, they're chronic illness, right? Or they're attributed to chronic stress. And so when we're overwhelming the nervous system consistently, we're burning out the feedback loops within our brain and within the central nervous system, which leads to the illnesses and issues that you described. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we can start to reverse the cycle, listen to ourselves, we start to get some of that back. People get healthier. They develop wholeness. Yeah. Right. Don't feel depressed, anxious, burnt out, crispy all the time, and develop interest and creativity again. Yeah.
So let me ask you, so what we're talking about right now is retraining or reprogramming essentially like the central nervous system through changes in lifestyle. But then I also know, as someone that's worked with retraining the nervous system from trauma a lot, that it takes time and effort, intentional exercises, things of that nature. But I also know that with ADHD in specifics, there's medication often prescribed. So is that always, you ever like ask a question, you're like, well, that's dumb. Anyway, how often is it possible to just reframe the way you're living your life and work with the nervous system versus taking a medication to help alter brain chemistry to be, I don't want to say productive because I hate that, but like to live a more fulfilling and healthy life?
Yeah. Well, I think what the topic that you're hitting on right there has to do with what I mentioned a second ago, privilege.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So some of us
Mhm.
have had the good fortune to be in a position where, for example, I went out and started my own company, right?
Right.
I
Same.
I had the
understand.
privilege to be able to step away from a corporate job to
Mhm.
start my own business and then to build a life that supports my nervous system.
Right.
I do fine unmedicated now. I
Mhm.
occasionally take a low dose of an antidepressant because I do run myself a little harder than my nervous system would like. And that's by preference. I like working a lot, but I function very well medication free most of the time because I just have built a life that my nervous system doesn't need to escape from. I
Okay.
know others in the same situation who have had the profound privilege to be able to slow their lives down, take care of their bodies, heal their heal their body with nutrition, and really take care of their nervous system in a way that they no longer need that. Now, the majority of people that I work with professionally don't
Mhm.
have access to those kind of
Right.
resources. They
Right.
don't have the ability to walk away from their career and into something that's self-employment and can meet their needs. So what happens is we meet the convergence of, need to provide for basic
Mhm.
necessities and also need to not be absolutely crazy because of what my nervous system is doing, or so depressed that I cannot function because of what my nervous system is doing. So I often find myself in places where we're trying to find the bridge. How do
Right.
we help you function enough to keep your basic needs met, to keep your job that you have to have
Mhm.
while we're working on those longer term solutions? That's where I really see medication being effective. Now, the person who is well medicated, who is effectively
Mhm.
medicated for ADHD, autism, all of the above, um, is probably not usually going to look as good as the person who's been able to actually remediate the causes in their life that cause that stress, right?
Yeah, I was just having. I'm smiling. I was just having this conversation with a client who's. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
coach, not a therapist, right? And so she's in therapy too. And I told her, you got to do the therapy if you're going to take the drugs, because the therapy is working on the long
Yeah.
term. The drugs are working on the short term, and the drugs
Mhm.
often help you get to a place where you can be effective in the work that you're doing in therapy. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes, yes. And so many times people come into awareness of, neurodivergence as a factor so burnt out that there are just no resources left to draw from to
Right.
start to address the
Right.
underlying
And
patterns,
that's where
right?
medication is really important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so I'm not anti-medication.
Mhm.
I am very intentional in medication recommendations. I'm not a prescriber, so I'll
Right.
talk with clients about how to educate themselves, questions to ask their doctor, things that they might consider, things that I've seen work for other people, so they can go make educated opinions. But we always talk about how do we also work on healing your life? How do we
Mhm.
also work on a better job environment, better pay balance,
Right.
addressing toxic relationships in your life that are really dragging you down and causing severe distress. Uh, yeah, so learning all those skills along the way. But if we need medication to support that, it's completely valid and life saving for
Right.
many
Right.
individuals.
And I think that, there's the stigma that we're talking about. A big part of it is around the medication as well,
Yeah.
because a really good friend of mine a few years ago, also a PhD, very successful woman around my age, in her mid 40s, put on Facebook, like, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I started taking medication and I thought I was, doing okay. I'm doing great now. Like, I've never felt like this before in my life, blah, 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 blah. And I thought her sharing was like, really inspiring, because that is one of the things that I think, there's areas in our culture that are so pro medication and so medication heavy that it's like, just take the pill and it makes it all go away. And then there's other areas where we've swung completely away and it's like, no, don't take any meds. You can do it on your own, blah, blah, blah. And so it is important to understand that the meds are there to help support us as we do the work, right?
Absolutely.
That's how I look at it. Sometimes they are needed long term. Totally understand. It's not up to me, and I'm not the judge on that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think taking them without putting in the effort towards long-term solutions is a disservice to yourself.
Absolutely. And you're just prolonging a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's still going to catch up with you. The stress is still going to tear down your body. You're still
Rare.
going to get burnout. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You may experience a boost and some temporary change. I had someone within the last year who started a medication regimen that felt like overnight life-changing, amazing, had been so medication resistant. And that was great for 2 to 3 months until their toxic relationship and overworking work hours just sucked the life out of them and drained them. They had to go back, make med adjustments, which were appropriate. They needed those changes. But they also ultimately came to the decision of making some relationship changes and really taking a hard look at vocation. It's been the thing. Like until they address those root causes of their distress, their body was going to keep catching up with them.
Right. Yep. Because it doesn't go away.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing, is that the majority of medications are dealing with the symptom, not the cause.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And and sometimes quieting the symptoms makes it get worse underneath if you're ignoring it, which is why we up and up and up the medication over time. But anyways, so that's cool. So in your practice, you work with, this is one of your specialty areas, correct?
It is, yeah, helping particularly adult women, but I also have some men who evaded diagnosis and are now questioning their neurodivergence, figure out how to kind of make sense of what it is that they're experiencing in the world. Now, I am, by label, I'm a trauma therapist. So I see a lot of people coming in with complex trauma. One of the greatest contributing factors to really life-altering PTSD from complex trauma in childhood is an individual who was neurodivergent or who was more neurodivergent from their family or was neurodivergent differently from their neurodivergent family and received tons of traumatic invalidation through childhood.
Right.
So they were told that what they were feeling was bad. They were told that they weren't feeling what they were actually feeling. You don't need to go to the bathroom. You just went. You're not cold. It's warm in here. Can't be hungry. I just fed you. Those kind of messages.
Right.
Or even told that they're bad for feeling the things that they do. Big girls don't cry. Boys don't get upset like that. Real men don't feel sad when they lose a friend. Those kind of messages. And so those traumatic invalidations, telling a child and an adolescent what you are innately experiencing isn't what you should be, it starts to disconnect us from ourselves. Now, that gets amplified so much when you have a neurodivergent kid that no one understands that way. And so what the world around them is seeing, people are saying, it doesn't make sense. Why are you, back to your workplace example, why do you come in here and just ask for the progress report? Don't you care about me? Like you're heartless and cold, or whatever the things were instead, right? People layer these stories around our behavior when I just need the progress report. Like, can you get that for me? That's
right.
I'm just on a target. And so we see these kids grow up who have been told their whole life that their experiences aren't the way that they should be, and they can't figure out why. They just know they're wrong somehow. So they come into my office with complex trauma, and autism, ADHD are not even blips on the radar. And so over and over, I have these conversations when I start to pick up certain things. I'm like, I think we should look at, I think I might be autistic, this book. I think we should maybe look at some of these questions together. And we'll start to talk about it. And for some of those folks, understanding and embracing a diagnosis is really valuable, to have that sense of, oh my gosh, I'm not broken. I'm just different. I was trying to fit into a world of horses and I'm a zebra. I might look
Right.
a lot like them, but I'm not them. I'm different.
Yeah.
And if I can understand that I'm different, I can go find the pack of zebras and now I'm good to go.
Right.
For other people, they're more resistant to a label or to a diagnosis, which is
Mm.
completely fine. And the label is, again, very pathologized, very stigmatized.
Mhm.
So for them, just understanding through a general lens of neurodivergence, how we listen to our bodies matters and helping build a good life. Those are really the two places that I see my work show up the most.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
And
yeah,
oh, well, and I was just gonna say, so we've been using these terms a lot, but if
yeah,
we could just like move into them a little bit. So like ADHD, autism, I think we explained that one pretty well. And then like neurodivergent, and then the one we're gonna use in a minute that we haven't yet is neuronormative,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. So neurodivergent is a fun word because basically, if you break it down, it's like your brain is different than other people's, right?
Right. Yeah.
Everybody's neurodivergent. There's no such thing
Exactly.
as the word you just brought up, neuronormative.
Yeah. Yeah.
The two words that get tossed around a lot in pop culture today are neurodivergent versus neurotypical. Are you a
Mhm.
neurotypical person or a neurodivergent person? And society, Western culture, normalizes what we currently call neurotypical. The
Mhm.
reality is appearing to be that neurotypicals are a minority. And
Right.
as we start to understand this more, what we have are people who fall into the neurodivergent camp. That's you and I.
Mhm. Mhm.
We actually make up the vast majority. The problem is we've had to learn the same social skills that neurotypical people do to function as a society as a whole, because these are pro-social behaviors.
Right.
Showing interest in a friend at the water cooler or a coworker at the water cooler before we ask about a progress report. That's a pro-social thing that protects our sense of community. So these
Mhm.
are these are not bad, inherently bad things, but because we have to learn those skills, our neurodivergence doesn't show through. People don't see it because we're good at pro-social behaviors and communication,
Mhm. Well,
right?
and people want to be typical and normal and
Yeah,
standard, right?
right,
And fit the box and not be ill,
right.
not be broken, not be different. Because like
Mhm.
you said, that's what protects us
Yeah, yeah,
is being like everyone else. That keeps us in
absolutely.
community. Hmm.
Fitting in, yeah.
Yeah.
The Divergent Mind book does a really good job of breaking this down of how neurodivergence is not really atypical at all. It's just a way of functioning that's valuable to society in many other ways
You
than.
know, I've had conversations with a lot of first responders
Mhm.
about that
Yeah,
and how a lot of first responders show up with or as having ADHD because
110%. Almost
that's
every single one of them. Like, you won't
yeah,
find one who doesn't. Yeah,
right.
I love it.
And it's what makes them good at their job.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
if they didn't have those skills, if their brain didn't work that way, they wouldn't be as good at their job, you know?
absolutely. That's
And I
a
always think like it's such
all
a
the
good
time.
example of how
Yeah,
important it is that we have
yeah,
neurodiversity.
right. Right. Because we need a uh, building full of people who can do absolutely nothing for 18 hours a day. And then those last 6 hours be running their wheels off, responding to emergencies, and not even blink in the transition between the two. And that is
Mhm.
perfect ADHD neurodivergence that makes up a beautiful wheelhouse full of first responders. I
Right.
love the guys, but gosh, to try to get them to hold a train of thought is absolutely a fantastic feat. Yeah. Good time. We have a great time. I work with a lot as well.
Nice. Nice.
Let's see, there was in your question that you or posed, I feel like there was another thread to pick up and I've lost it. Neurodivergent, neurotypical,
Autism.
neuronormative,
Yeah.
autism.
Well, and I think we talked about
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the difference between ADHD and ADD. You know, I guess the other thing too, I got to get these two books that you mentioned, and I'll definitely put the titles in the text for the show. Because I think good books on this kind of stuff are always great to find. But the actual like symptoms, I hate to even use that word, right? But the signs of ADHD
Yeah,
and what
yeah.
that looks like, because I always imagine like some Bart Simpson type kid running around, screaming, banging on walls, blah, 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 blah. But that's not how it shows up in women. Like, girls or women.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let me touch on the ADHD versus ADD, because this question still comes around a lot. ADD is actually an outdated term. We no longer use that. It's no longer a diagnostic distinction. And it's kind of like, just brain farting on a word here. Highly functioning autistic kids are, your brother is, what's his you said Asperger's. There we go. Which is not a formal diagnosis. It's not something we use anymore, but it used to be. So the word is still around. So ADHD right now, which I love, I have to emphasize now because diagnostic categories change all the time. ADHD has 3 types of presentation. There's inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, or combined. So typically we think of hyperactive impulsive is what your kind of textbook bouncing off the walls, Bart Simpson character is. Yeah. Right. And that's your loud, boisterous kid who can't sit still, talks too much, and gets in trouble at school for being in everybody's business. And it doesn't matter which table you sit them at, they're going to cause disruption there too. Yeah. Inattentive type is more what we used to call ADD. So it's people who are not necessarily hyperactive, not necessarily bouncing off the walls all the time, but they struggle with attention. Now, there's a flip side of that, which is hyperfocus, right? I'm really brilliant at hyperfocus. If you need me to focus on progress notes, good luck. Like, that is going to take practically an act of Congress to get me to sit down and finish 10 notes. But you want to put a budget spreadsheet in front of me with like numbers I'm trying to manipulate and work on, getting some things planned out. I'll be there for 12 hours. Thank you very much. Love it. Give me a spreadsheet. I've been like made fun of in good-hearted ways endlessly for years about my love for numbers and spreadsheets. I say, I think I was an accountant in a previous life or will be in the next one. I might have missed my calling because it's just, and I think it's just enough different from what I do in my day-to-day life. And I like numbers. That it's like, okay, what can I do with this? How can I tabulate this data in a way that makes my brain really, really happy?
Oh, gosh. And I always say, thank God for people like you, because that's the opposite of me.
A lot of therapists and healing professionals don't do numbers, and I do. So it's a side gig because I do some business consulting because of that. I love it.
Nice.
Yeah. So inattentiveness. Hey, there we go. Train of thought. So us inattentive folks kind of go all over the place. We have squirrel brains. You'll hear that all the time. Shiny object. I started talking about this, and now I'm 3 light years away on this topic over here, and it all connected, and nobody has any idea how, but I got from point A to point C real easily in my brain. Right. Yeah. Lots of need for variety and difficulty with expected routines. So ADHD women tend to really struggle with schedule. Some of us are either like way early or chronically late. Needing things to have right. So one of the things I really love about self-employment is I can change what I do a lot, right? I have my bread and butter of my clients, but I also do business consulting. I also do some nonprofit work. I also do volunteering with our first responders. I'm all over the place. I do some social activism with, legislative reform. I am somehow developing a side hobby of insurance billing and figuring that out for a group practice. And I don't know how that became a rewarding and pleasurable thing for me, but here we are, and I'm figuring out. And now I'm like, how do I sit here enjoying this? That used to bring me so much dread. But it's the variety. It keeps me in my creative space. And when you have a job or when you have a routine that doesn't have that, people with ADHD tend to really struggle and do things that are life disrupting. This is where they come in with sensory seeking behavior, substance use, sex, spending, lots of things that look very life disrupting from the outside, but they're sensory deprived. They're dopamine deficit, binge eating, lots of food for satisfaction. Now, on the autism side, we have a couple of contrasting things. A lot of that's similar and the same, but we also have a need for routine. We have need for sameness. We have need for consistency. And you start messing with someone who's in the autism category's routine, and the wheels fall off the bus and they can't function through the day. So when you overlap somebody like myself who has both, it's a hot mess because I both need everything to be different. Different parts of my routine to hold it together, and those two parts of my brain sometimes do not get along at all. And I'm just left in this, like, I call it kind of this spinning office chair of I don't know what to do next, but I can't do anything because the lights are too bright or the fan is making a noise. Yeah. So
yes. Yeah. Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I change my schedule all the time. I've given up trying to make a standard routine for myself, even though I constantly tell myself, you know what I need is a routine. And then I also think about how all of my stuff has a space that it lives in.
Right.
And when people put things in spaces they don't belong in, it makes me a little twitchy.
Yes. Yes. Gosh, one of my interns will probably tell this story for a long time. She's often the last one out of the office. And when she would leave, she was so good about turning all the lights off and shutting everything up. And she would turn our sound machines off, which seems to make perfect sense. They're like little white noise machines, right? Makes perfect sense. So when I come in running 10 minutes late in the morning to start the day and the sound machines aren't on, I have to bend over because I am a one-trip person. I will only take one trip. It doesn't matter how much stuff. So I've got, my coffee and my bag, all this other stuff that I'm juggling, and I have to bend over to the floor to turn on these sound machines. It drove me absolutely batty up the wall. I was like, Sarah, you have to leave the sound machines on. Everything else turn off. You have to leave this on. And that was just the thing. I was like, this is what my brain needs to be happy. It doesn't make a lick of sense, but I need you to leave this out. And she laughed hysterically at it and started leaving the sound machines on. And I arrive at the office very fine. I can step on my clickers to turn on our lamps and we are good to go without spilling the coffee. Yeah. But it's just those little things, right? They give us our consistency and our stability and our routines.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's crazy. I think too, like the amount of crossover between all these different things. And that's one thing about the DSM that is difficult. One thing about any kind of label that we're going to put on anything that's difficult is that human beings are these unique, diverse, wonderful things, right? Beings. And we can't be just one thing ever. Like that's just not how it works, and so it's important to allow for more to exist than whatever one word label gets pushed your way, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A big downfall of a lot of folks that fall into the autistic brained camp is rigidity, black and white thinking, difficulty with flexibility. And so we tend to see things as being one way or the other and have difficulty seeing what's in between. And that conflicts so much with what the whole spectrum of neurodivergence is, which is beautifully different every moment of every day. And for us to remember that we are far more than a set of traits or a place on a spectrum or a diagnosis, and that your limits can change day to day. What I can do when I'm really burnt out and overwhelmed is very different from what I can do on a day or on a week when I've had lots of space and time and spaciousness for my nervous system to rest and be okay. I've been joking. October 1st is my favorite day of the year. So I'm glad we're doing this today. It'll be memorable. Our niece born today, as of today. So that's exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah. But so I just kind of joke that coming into fall is like my season because I'm way more caught up on things than I have ever been. Like it's kind of wild how little is on my to-do list that's overdue. And I've got all this energy and it's just something with the cooling temperatures, the changing trees. I just love this season. Like I'm a cool weather person.
Same.
And to feel the slowing down of the universe as you come into fall, the days get a little shorter, the expectations are a little less. And my brain just loves it.
I was just talking to a friend earlier about how I'm ready to hibernate. I'm like, I'm bring it on. I'm ready for it. Yeah, absolutely.
So finding
I was just going to say, like, you're talking about like the black and white thinking, looking back across my life, now I am privileged that I have the ability to like change up my day and change my hours as I need. And I can travel when I want to for the most part and all of that. And it's lovely. And one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of my black and white strict thinking has relaxed because I feel like, and for a long time I was like, I was like, oh man, I had anxiety. like high functioning anxiety, and I had no idea. But really, I was just so stressed out being forced into the confines of the job that I had, the life I had, the sleep schedule that I had to be a part of, to be successful, and all of these external demands, that I had zero space for wiggle or movement anywhere else. And so the littlest things would set me off, whereas now, that I have more space and I have such a greater capacity for thought and creativity and things to be not exactly what they need to be, et cetera, et cetera. But I even translate that into like a lot of the leadership work that I've done, and talking about how we wear out the prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
And as that part of the brain gets tired, we do, roll into that space where we don't want to make decisions anymore, and things are or they aren't, and we're not going to try and explore anymore. And then this is just what it is because we're too tired,
Yeah.
And so I wonder with people who are more neurodivergent or ADHD, if the prefrontal cortex gets worn out faster because of how much we bounce around. I mean, and I don't know the answer. This is just something that popped into my head.
The theory fits. Absolutely. That fits with, and that's why we see. So I had an argument with a psychologist once. It felt like an argument to me. I'm not sure it did to her. Where I was consulting on a case that she had previously assessed and making a case for this individual being blatantly autistic. Young female in college, dropping out of college because of difficulty with symptoms. And the psychologist said to me, she's not autistic. She just has smart kid burnout. And I cocked my head and went, what do you think smart kid burnout is?
Right.
Like, what even that? So the theory or the phrase smart kid burnout, we see these a lot of times female, very successful academically in school. They do all the extracurriculars. They are able to manage tons of stuff because they keep tightly held routines. They're valedictorian, salutatorian, top percentages of their class. And they get to college and they kind of start to get a little frazzled because suddenly all of the social rules are different. And then they either hit, sophomore, junior year, or sometimes they make it past graduation. And you just see this like fracturing crumble that occurs. And suddenly they can't do anything. Like they are completely non-functional in life. And they're like, what is happening? And they can't make themselves shower or do laundry or eat basic meals. They're in complete and utter collapse. And we call it smart kid burnout because what better non-clinical term would that be? Well, what's happening is when you raise a kid in a very structured way that leads for all of that success, and then you just immediately collapse the scaffolding without getting a new set of rules, we go into overcompensation mode so intensely, there's that prefrontal collapse. And because, they don't have any language or understanding for what's going on, they don't know what they're experiencing are yellow and then red flags telling them to slow down, to adjust, to get recentered. They just keep pushing forward, keep pushing
and
through.
In college, they're on their own.
Yeah, exactly. Mom and dad often don't even realize that they're having these kinds of difficulties. And then they hit that brick wall and it's full stop, no choice in the matter. Their brains are just no longer functioning. And that's where I pick up a lot of kids with figuring out, okay, how do we start to rethink your life? How do we start to rethink how you see yourself and everything? Because the very things that made you so successful in high school are now killing you because you're not listening to them.
Right.
You're not adjusting. Yeah. So that takes us to that, prefrontal cortex collapse, like you described. Now, some people don't hit intense burnout or intense collapse, right? Some people keep going, keep dragging on, and then they hit late 20s, early 30s. I've seen even as late as their 40s where they hit that same, like, I cannot function another day. My sensory over. Now we have 3 kids running around. We have our own kids' schedules to coordinate. We have a professional career. We're expected to maintain relationships, friendships. I don't even know who I am anymore. And the same thing happens. They hit that brick wall. A lot of times for moms and for, middle-aged women, even who don't have kids, we sensory overwhelm will become a big part of it. That will really just let you feel, again, if the lights are wrong, it
Mhm.
feels like your skin is on fire and you can't explain why, but you cannot do another thing until the lights are changed. And so the same thing has happened where it's taken longer, but
Right,
you
right.
hit the point of burnout where you can no longer push through.
So let me ask you, because I definitely like burned myself out multiple times in my life. Okay.
Yeah.
Just being totally like transparent here. And then would like be like, okay, like burn out, recoup with lots of resources and lots of help, get it back together, go again, 150 miles an hour, and then burn out again because I'm really good at it. And
Think
what I've
about this.
noticed as I've gotten older, like you mentioned the lights a few times, right? So like overhead lights bother me more. The
Yes.
texture of clothing and the way things feel on my skin bothers me more. And I honestly think it always bothered me,
Yeah.
but I ignored and pushed through. And I've
Yeah.
gotten to a point now where I'm like, no, I'm not dealing with this shit anymore.
Yes.
And so I'm actually allowing myself to like call out the things that make me uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's part of that privilege too, right? Is that
Absolutely.
I can change my space and make those decisions for myself. And I think, when we are in the corporate job that has the fluorescent overheads and there's nothing we can do, towards the end of being in the corporate world, I started bringing a lamp to work.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
even if I couldn't turn off the lights, there was a softer glow
Yeah.
over my own stuff.
Yes.
But I think as we get older,
Mhm.
we do start to notice those things
Mhm.
because we can't not notice them
Yeah.
anymore
Yeah.
and keep going.
Right. Right. The impact of all of it is cumulative. And also you're more aware, right? You've
Yeah.
spent a lot of
Mhm.
time in your life overcoming those different seasons of burnout by noticing what you're experiencing, by becoming more connected to yourself. And it's hard to turn that off after you've dialed in.
Yeah.
So, the first thing I do whenever I shop for anything is all the tags get cut out.
Yeah.
Honestly, I keep kid you not, keep a seam ripper in my bathroom and, got, a little caddy for fingernail clipping stuff. There's a
Mhm.
seam ripper in there that's sole purpose is to remove tags in new shirts, so that when
Beautiful.
I'm getting
Yeah.
ready and I'm pulling out a new shirt, when I've, done a shopping trip, I can remove the tag without damaging it because I learned the hard way to not just chop them out with scissors because 'cause you'll create holes from just sheer angst at some point. Yeah. Right, to actually remove the sleeves. Yeah, I have a lot of my wardrobe is the same thing, so I find a nice soft cotton top that I like, and I get it in 4 or 5 colors, and I wear
Same,
them to oblivion, right?
same. Like I'm wearing one right now that I have in 4 colors. And
Yeah.
earlier today, I was in the pottery studio and I noticed a teeny little hole and I was like, "No, this is my last black one. I don't think they
Right,
make it anymore."
right, and that's the thing, you can't find them anymore, it's like, "What am I ever going to do? I can never
No.
dress myself again." That's the
Right.
crisis. Yes.
And then it's like,
Yes.
"Okay, probably
Yeah.
just find another black shirt. It'll be fine. It'll
Yeah,
be
yeah.
fine."
Yeah, this is super dramatic, but I found these amazing knit maternity tops and, breastfeeding tops that are, so comfortable, and I would put them on a bunch of different colors I got from this Amazon seller and would just wear different cardigans over them, and I mean, they were just my absolute favorite. I loved them so much I had to get pregnant again just so I could keep wearing them. Yeah, yeah, just
Oh
anyways.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, part of it too, in the like, just acknowledging that we are neurodivergent, acknowledging that, I might be on the autistic spectrum, acknowledging these things about myself almost like gives me permission to
Yes.
like
That's it.
be in this different space, right? And like I mentioned, like having the terminology and being able to talk about it
Mhm.
with others is really helpful for me too. But even something as simple as like, like when you're getting dressed and everything you're wearing makes you feel like fat and uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? And like giving yourself permission to be like, okay, then we're just not going to dress in any of those clothes
Mhm.
and we're going to wear whatever it takes to
Yeah.
feel comfortable and good about ourselves.
Yeah.
And like, that's
Rather
fine.
than shaming my body, I'm going to take care of my body. Yeah.
Yeah, or feeling like
Absolutely.
crap all day because I have to look a certain way. I'm
Right.
gonna wear what feels good. And so, I mean,
Mm.
that's just like a small example that I think though that happens so often for us
Yeah.
that like recognizing these things about ourselves allows us or gives us the permission to do things a little bit different. And that's okay.
Yeah,
Make yourself feel good.
absolutely. So before we run out of time, on that topic of self-validation, kind of owning potential diagnosis, there's three kind of main schools of thought that we alluded to briefly earlier. Yeah. So official diagnosis, which is going through a physician or a psychologist and getting a battery of assessments. For some people, that's the option you need to feel good about owning a label. And that is absolutely valid if you choose to go that route. I will caveat, there's a lot of assessors that don't know how to assess women effectively, especially adult women. And so finding an assessor who is skilled with screening your demographic for these conditions is really important.
Well, and also I'll tell you, like, I've been screened for certain things here and there, but I'm very intelligent, like gifted IQ intelligent. And so I have figured my way around shit my whole life. And so I've failed screenings for things that I know I have. Yeah. Because of the different things that I've put in place to help myself be successful. So I think that, can be a problem with those screenings as well.
Yep. So professional diagnosis, honestly, for adults, if you are not disabled because of your symptoms, really, I recommend against most of the time. I don't find the expense and trouble valuable for most people, with rare exceptions.
It could even be invalidating.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Yeah. I know many people who've been wrongly diagnosed with, oh gosh, a whole slew of terrible things that just were not at all accurate. So then we have, peer and self-diagnosis, which is where most of the folks that I work with end up feeling very comfortable. A resource that I highly recommend is Embrace Autism. It's just embrace-autism.com. And it has a whole battery of assessments, as well as just tremendous educational resources on what autism looks like in adult populations. It's a Canadian psychologist who has made a lot of stuff available for free. There'll be an assessment battery where it describes the assessment. It tells who it's for. It tells pros and cons of, like, here's some limitations. Here's some things it does really well. Nice. You take it, and then it's going to break down all of your results in a really detailed, intuitive way. And so I have people start with if you're curious about autism in particular, I recommend that people take 4 specific tests. I have them take the autism quotient, the 50-question version, the RADS-R, which is 80 statements, the CAT-Q, which is actually for how much do you mask. And so if your masking score is really high, it means you dial all your other scores up a couple notches. And then the ASPE quiz, which is 121 questions. And they all kind of look at things slightly different. But if you take all 4 of those and you're coming in positive, okay, we have a large body of data here that you fall into the neurodivergent territory, as well as a lot of breakdowns about how this applies for you. There's more than that on there, but those 4 are what I always start people with is let's begin here.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll make sure and put that in our notes for this episode as well, because I think that's really important.
Okay. Hopefully we're coming back in.
Yep, I got you now.
Okay, good deal. Okay. Let's start here and let's take a good look here and then see where that takes us. There's one that's a categorizing quotient that a typical neurotypical woman will score in the 40s. A typical autistic woman will score in the 70s. And I hit in like the 140s the first time I took it. My superpower is finding connections and things.
Gotcha.
So that's a fun one. I like to see how a spiderweb connects.
Yeah.
Emphasis of all of this is go out and find stuff that resonates for you and use it to understand yourself more effectively. Find a skilled clinician. We have a therapist in our practice who just does autism education sessions. He has you take some of those batteries and then he does like an hour and a half with you and goes through, here's how you use this to start building your life better. And that's a service we offer at our practice.
That is awesome.
Find a therapist that's neurodivergent affirming and not just let's help fix what's broken, who can help you figure out how to build a world that works well. And this is all true for ADHD, autism, and complex PTSD.
Oh, Raven, that's so cool. And do you guys see each other or see people virtually as well as in person?
We do. Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's education sessions we can do across state lines because
I was just going to ask you that.
We can offer those anywhere.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I'm so excited. Okay. All right. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up tonight?
Oh gosh, there's so much data, but let's just, yeah. I love
Okay.
it.
So if there was one thing that you wanted to just share with everyone, what would it be?
Know yourself and trust yourself.
Mm,
My whole theory of change, everything that I do as a therapist is about expanding someone's window of tolerance. So helping us tolerate more without breaking down,
mhm.
and then increasing your sense of trust in yourself as an innately wise human being.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Beautiful.
That's what
Thank
it's
you
all
so
about.
much. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
I 100% agree. And it takes work getting to know ourselves sometimes,
Yeah.
but you're worth it. We're
Yep.
all worth it, right? So, yeah. Well, Raven, thank you so much for being with me tonight and having this conversation. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot. I can't wait to go take these quizzes, read these books, and learn even more. And I just really appreciate what you're doing in the world. So thank you.
Well, same to you. I appreciate the opportunity to come out. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Bye, everyone that's listening or watching. And I hope you have a great week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining us on the Energetic Psyche, a podcast that live streams every week, Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join us again in the future. Have a great week.